All right, welcome to Chapter 7, talking about arrays and lists in this chapter. And here are the following topics. There's a lot of topics. It's focusing around, of course, arrays. We'll be looking at how we can use different types of arrays and all the different syntaxes to that. So you guys can read through the topic list there. We start off with talking about value types and reference types. And we talked a bit about this in the previous chapter. But the .NET Framework has two basic categories, this value type and this reference type. So when we're setting up simple variable types like integers, decimals, doubles, that sort of thing, those variables are being stored directly in the memory as value types because those are actual values and they actually hold the data in them. Now, when it comes to a reference type, when a variable and you're setting up a variable that is used as a reference to an object, and it's usually called a reference variable. So these don't actually hold a value; they hold a reference to where that particular object is in the memory. They don't hold any data. So the value types actually hold the value, where the reference types hold where the reference to that object is in another part of memory. So how a value type works is basically that when we create something like an int, a double, or decimal, we're actually creating and dimensioning out in the memory that particular data type, and it's based on it's like an int holds 4 bytes and a double holds 8 bytes, so we want to select the right size, and we actually load the actual number we want in there, and that value we can reference it, we can access that information. So that's why they refer to it as a value type, because you're actually holding the value itself. So when you're working with a reference type, there's two things going on here. A reference is an object that is created in what they call the heap memory in the RAM. This is a part of the RAM. And a variable that references the object in the stack memory. So how does that work? So an object that is created in that heap memory holds the piece of data that you're using, and you need to a way to refer to it. You need a way to talk to it or connect to it. So a variable is then created to hold a value called a reference, and that reference really is just a piece of is the memory location of where that data is, where that data is being held. So the reference variable doesn't hold the actual piece of data. That piece of data is actually put up onto the heap. The reference variable is actually in the stack, and so you got this stack and this heap. So the book uses this metaphor of a kite and a string, where the spool here is kind of like the stack and that variable that we've created, and the data is what we're going to be creating up onto the heap, and it's the kite itself. And we're going to tie the two together by addressing where exactly is it being stored. So in this example, what you're looking at is some different variable types here. And there's two parts of the memory, the stack and the heap. So a lot of the variables that are declared as value are stored simply in the stack. So for example, an integer, a double, and a decimal here, you've got the actual value here. 10 can be stored in here, or let's say pi, you've got a decimal number, double, and then you've got a decimal amount, let's say a dollar amount here, that you're actually storing these values inside the stack. Now, so that's these three here, they get stored down there. Now, if you're going to set up a reference type, for example, like a string name, and you're going to assign, let's say, Bob, or a random generator, those are stored up onto the heap. So here's, for example, right here, a string called name, and it's actually pointing and it's referencing. So this right here is where the reference comes in. So it's referencing to an address. This is like a location of where that is in the memory, and it's dimensioning out 1, 2, 3 here, so it can. That's why it's 0 to 2. It's referencing out 3, and then random would do the same thing. So these two here are reference types because it's put up, and the data is actually up on the heap memory. All right, so I hope that makes some sense, and I'll see you guys in the next video.